Our discussion today, when we first scheduled this several weeks ago, was a discussion to focus on how the legal profession should honor the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. But we can't overlook what has happened over the last few days, couple days particularly. And we have just the right person to help guide us through that conversation, and Mr. Aaron Burrell. I will first introduce him, and then I want to talk about the last couple of days. And I want to encourage you, again, this is a conversation. I want to encourage everybody to offer their take on particularly how the last couple of days would have been interpreted, viewed perhaps by MLK Jr. So Mr. Burrell is from the Dickinson Wright law firm, and he's done a ton in his already illustrious career at a very early age, in my opinion, and has done a ton of things in the legal profession throughout his career. For example, and we'll put his bio in the chat so you can be even more impressed. He is a member of the Board of Commissioners of the State Bar of Michigan. He's chair of its Representative Assembly, a member of the Board of Directors of WMU Cooley, as well as the Oakland County Bar Association, the past president of the Straker Bar Association, and past vice president of the Straker Bar Foundation, foundation fellow of both the American Bar Foundation and the Oakland County Bar Foundation, a former affiliate of the National Bar Association, a former co-chair of the State Bar of Michigan's Equal Access Initiative. If you look at his bio, you'll see that he's been featured in a variety of publications, telling everybody what a super lawyer he is. Detroit Business Magazine, Diversity MBA Magazine, the top 100 under 50 emerging and executive leaders of 2020, claims Detroit Business, Detroit Metropolitan Association. He was even a recipient of the WMU Cooley Leadership Achievement Award in 2019. So we knew this was coming from Aaron even before he left us. As I said, this is a conversation. And on Monday, January 18th, we'll be celebrating the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And we will get to the impact of MLK on the legal profession and kind of what role the legal profession will play moving forward, particularly after the last couple of days. But we first have to talk about Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, we witnessed the election of two Democrats from Georgia to the Senate. A historically red state suddenly was turned blue with the election of President-elect Joe Biden and two Democrat senators. The first one, John Ossoff, the youngest senator elected into office at the age of 33, since, ironically, President-elect Joe Biden, who is also Jewish, of Jewish faith. And of course, there's Reverend Raphael Warnock, a preacher at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the spiritual home of MLK, and the first Black senator elected from the state of Georgia. And I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, maybe the sixth or seventh African-American senator elected in our history. Then yesterday, we witnessed the horrific siege on the Capitol by white domestic terrorists, which resulted in 4 deaths. One of them was shot. And I think it's important that we also include in our discussion today the elephant in the room. We've seen it on social media outlets yesterday and today and other sources, discussions around kitchen tables all over the country, clearly drawing a distinction between how the siege was handled from an enforcement point of view when compared to how many Black Lives Matters protests were handled. To put it bluntly, if yesterday's insurgents were Black, Muslim, Latino, or LGBTQ individuals, for example, would there have been a different response? I think of today, I've heard maybe 50 or so people have been arrested. Have you all heard the same thing? 50-ish. And I want to invite all of us to chime in on this because I don't want to just put this burden on Mr. Burrell. But I'd like to talk about these last couple of days to get our conversation started. So, Mr. Burrell, if you have some insight, what would Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. be saying today? Imagine him on the morning shows today or cable news outlets, and he's commenting on what happened on Tuesday and then what happened on Wednesday. What do you think his take on this would be?
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate the question. And First of all, before I even get started, I see so many of my friends and colleagues on the screen here. So I'd like to give certainly honor to Dean McGrath and many of my I see old professors here. I feel like almost I'm on the hot seat at, at the moment because I see so many of my old professors on the screen here. But it's good to see all of you. It is certainly good to be around my Cooley family. I've only accomplished the things that I was able to accomplish thus far in my career because you guys set the foundation for me. I see so many of you on the screen right now. I'm literally forever indebted to you guys for what you've done for me. So with that, wow, right? The last couple of days, um, it is it's hard to put this particular climate into words. And I think Martin Luther King, the eloquent spokesman that he was, would have been certainly more capable of finding the appropriate words to try to define the last couple of days. But we can take from some of his statements what we could imagine, he would give us, as guidance over the last couple of days. You mentioned first, Paul, the election of two uh, Democrats, right? Two liberal individuals in a predominantly, or what appeared to be at the time, a predominantly Republican or conservative state. And, without getting too political, I think we could draw on Martin Luther King's statement that, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it always bends towards justice, right? And what we saw there is just a long, slow, steady progression of not just a certain set of political beliefs, but a set of principles, right? The respect for one another that's starting to become, I think, more and more the most accepted viewpoint in our society, right? It's taking a long time, obviously, to get there. Sometimes it's frustratingly slow. But I think, Dr. King would be extremely encouraged to see what happened in Georgia and frankly see what happened in the presidential election. Again, I hate to be too political here, but I think there are certain norms, there are certain sets of standards. There's a decency that we expect of our leaders, that we expect, frankly, of one another. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that. We have seen what appears to be a disrespect, if you will, for certain common norms. Definitely a disrespect of the rule of law. And I think we can see in the election people finally saying, what, I don't think that is consistent with my understanding of what being an American is, right? This is not the behavior that I would expect to see from my leaders. I want to see something different, right? And that inures to ultimately, a lot of positive impact moving forward uh, for our country generally. But when it's funny, you have the 2 days, right? Because you mentioned, Paul, that you have one day where it appears that this arc is moving forward and we're getting to where we need to be. But then you have yesterday, and wow, it's interesting. Terry and Paul and I just spoke a moment ago, and I sent him an email that essentially said, this is the type of thing that I think we probably should talk about. Paul said, yeah, that's a good idea. And then we saw on the TV, this carnage unfold. Um, and it gives you some perspective, right? When you think you're making that type of progress, it's almost the, 2 steps forward, 1 back, right? Um, the events of yesterday, I think, demonstrated the dangers that we confront. If we don't uphold the values that we should uphold and keep sacred as lawyers, when I see that type of carnage, when I see that type of, lawlessness, that lack of respect for our institutions, you know, I'm greatly pained for our country and our citizens. And I know Dr. King would have been greatly pained for our country and our citizens. But as lawyers, many of us on the screen, I see our lawyers, and we should be even more disheartened by this, right? the very first thing that we do when we take that oath is we swear to support the Constitution of the United States, right? And that document lays the groundwork for true freedom, true equality for everyone. But the document itself, right, is just a piece of paper in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. What gives life to the document, right? What animates that document, what gives it its being, its purpose, is its citizenry, but most prominently, the lawyers, I would argue, who read it, who have to clarify that Constitution, interpret it, and ultimately enforce it, right? So, yesterday, what I saw uh, was a failure in that, right? Because, and frankly, and just to be candid, this is not a political statement. This is just my interpretation of the law. They have, there's a certain set of individuals who have supported positions that are not legally or factually supported, right? And many of those individuals are lawyers. And, had any of these lawyers stepped in and either advised the president or advised certain of the individuals in the administration or tried to quell certain of this anger, this angst that we see, maybe yesterday may not have happened, right? But instead, what I did see, what people all around the country uh, essentially supporting false and unsupported allegations, and they've been denied around the country. And so you have the situation where people believe that they are being taken advantage of. They think that literally this institution, the Constitution, and all of the things that we hold dear are now, frankly, not being upheld, and they don't value or trust the system at this point. And again, this is not a political statement, but we have done very little, or at least the administration has done very little to try to reinforce or even add anything to the foundation that we hold dear as a country. So, say, Paul, I would say it would disappoint King greatly. And you mentioned one other thing, and I know we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more. But yeah, this past summer there was, I think, a galvanizing effect in our country when we had to witness the deaths of just a few sampling of African American individuals. That's just a sample, right? That is not even the scratch of the surface ultimately. But when we saw George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, Ahmaud Arbery on video many times, and lose their lives, sometimes at the hands of law enforcement. You see why we had that type of emotion. The way we reacted to it was because it was just the callousness that we saw on the screen, right? And trying to react to that. But yesterday, what we saw was a very delayed reaction to a more aggressive threat. This was what appeared to me to be a very dangerous, imminent threat, not just to one individual or to a small set of individuals, but to the entire institution of government as we understand it. And the law enforcement response was quite slow. The law enforcement response was very delayed, and it didn't appear to be as robust as what we saw even a few months ago when the president wanted to take a photo out in front of a church. So, ultimately, it's disheartening. It's disheartening. But I think also Martin Luther King would take a positive viewpoint. He would say, look, we're still on that moral arc, right? We're still getting to the goal, but we have to hit these rough patches. We have to try to hurdle some of these challenges to get there, but ultimately we'll get there.
And this may be an obvious question. Again, we'll take, people's comments and questions in the chat, or if you want to chime in. Again, we just don't want this to be a dyad here of a conversation. So what does the legal profession et al. Do right now? There were very few arrests for the number of people that were there and the behavior that we saw. I'm assuming that federal and local agencies can do face recognition and things of that nature to begin to identify individuals. But then you've got a profession, at least in some folks' eyes, that we've got two senators who are former Supreme Court Justice clerks arguing aspects of the conversations I think what most constitutional scholars, again, I'm an amateur, would say are false. And so you've got these two worldviews that are colliding at a time. How do we hold this kind of behavior, people that are exhibiting it, accountable? How do you do that?
And it's a challenge, right? Because I think in the past we at least held a set of facts that we would all agree on, right? And then we can debate certainly the merits relative to those facts, but there was never any question relative to the facts, right? Now we've gone so far down the road here where we don't agree on the basic facts, right? When I say there are 11,000 votes in favor of Joe Biden, we usually didn't dispute that. We would dispute maybe aspects of how those votes came together, but we never disputed the facts themselves. At this point, we're at a tough place because we don't even have what appears to be a set of facts from which to debate. But I'd say this to your point, there are lawyers that are front and center in this, right? You mentioned Ted Cruz on one side, but there are lawyers on the other side, right? Front and center on this, right? And I think lawyers, we are on the front lines of this fight, okay? We have that awesome privilege of taking that lawyer's oath. So we realize that we don't just have an opportunity to make things right. I think we have a responsibility to try to make things right? To try to positively impact the dialogue, to try to positively impact the debate. That's our responsibility as attorneys. So I don't think it goes to any one group of lawyers, right? I think that certainly people in the administration and in our government, I think they have the most prominent responsibility to address many of these issues, but it doesn't stop with them. I think it goes all the way down the chain, right? I think you have an opportunity and an obligation to act, right? Paul, you mentioned, a couple of individuals on our previous call, and I think lawyers are taking our courts for granted, and it's unfortunate. One thing I always admire about Cooley Law School is that we prided ourselves on ethics, right? And I'm looking at Joan Vestra and my professional responsibility teacher on the screen here today. But we pride ourselves on the ability to see right and wrong and always go the right way, right? Our honor code, I still hear it in my mind, right? 10 years removed from the law school, right? And it is literally one of those things that I think it changes the person that you are for the better, right? The way we look at ethics, the way we look at the legal profession. And what I see here now is, lawyers taking that for granted. It says, you must not lie to our tribunals. You can't make a mockery of our courts or take advantage of the courts. The oath says, you can't counsel or maintain any suit or proceeding which shall appear to me to be unjust. Instead, you have to maintain causes that are consistent with truth and with honor, right? That's the lawyer's responsibility. So I've seen, unfortunately, around the country, people standing before courts with very few actual facts and try to make arguments with very little support. And it's damaging the credibility of the legal system. It's damaging the credibility of legal profession, of the bar. It's nothing can be gained from this approach. So it starts with us literally looking at ourselves in the mirror and say, what can we do as a profession to try to hold some of these bad apples accountable, right? And I've heard about instances where if you made blatant misrepresentations to the tribunal, then ultimately people are trying to get their law license removed or file ethics complaints against them. But we have to hold each other accountable. That's one of the responsibilities of lawyers. And
Yeah.
what I'm seeing here is just we're not doing that, Paul. It's unfortunate for where we are today.
Yeah, and it's, given that the profession is self-policing, and we've witnessed the behavior of some of the attorneys through the processes that we've been talking about, and the role that attorneys that might take sides on the right of folks to do what they did yesterday. What does the profession do? What does the American Bar Association do to people that are abusing their power, if you want to call it that, by presenting frivolous, some would say, counts of the law in front of courts all over, rising up to the highest court that didn't even entertain the complaint put forward by President Trump. So, what is the profession, the kind of inside of itself? What do we do?
Well, that's a good point. I'd say, and obviously I have a lot of experts on the line here, so you guys can definitely jump
Simon.
in. The leadership of the ABA, I think, especially with our good buddy and friend Reggie Turner coming in as the next president. The ABA, I think, has always stood up for what I perceive to be the appropriate interpretation of constitutional principles. They've always done that. State Bar of Michigan, where I'm very, very involved, has always done that. But I think a lot of it starts with the courts. Now, I'm hoping that the Supreme Court, although they could just deny cert on many of these, requests, on these cert requests, I would hope that they actually responded with some clarification. And I say that lightly. I think they should actually write an opinion that not only denied the cert petition, but specifically stated that there are no grounds for it whatsoever. And now that there are no grounds for it, that we may have to sanction the lawyers who provided this particular plea, right? I mean, because and I practice in federal court, and if you had filed a brief that literally had no support in fact or law, I'm asking for sanctions under Rule 11. And I'm asking for the same ones in Michigan state courts. So, we have to police each other, right, in many respects. And I think it starts, to your point, Paul, with the courts. The courts are doing a great job writing opinions that demonstrate to many of these lawyers that they don't have, a leg to stand on, if you will. But, it's going to take that plus some, and issuing statements is great. I think every president of every bar association will probably issue a statement coming up in the next few days. But we have to look at these people and be able to literally say, are we going to allow this to stand? Are we as a bar going to allow this type of behavior to go with without any repercussions? And if we do that, if we actually allow this to happen, and we're not going to make any progress moving forward, Paul.
Yeah, and not to get too far out of bounds here, on the way in this morning on NPR, they were talking about how many leaders of the financial institutions were stepping forward with public statements denouncing the activities that occurred yesterday, which is kind of an interesting take. I said, this is a way to kind of get some momentum going in the right direction if it starts to hit people's pocketbooks, but also the stock market yesterday did quite well. It didn't suffer from what some may have perceived to have occurred. Professor Mitchell Chisholm, I'm wondering if you would be willing just to kind of flesh out a little bit what you said here. Professor said the bad actors are promoted on many occasions. What's your thinking on that, Professor Mitchell?
Hi, everybody. Well, obviously my experience is in the criminal justice system, and time again, I personally witness criminal justice bad actors, prosecutors who've suppressed favorable evidence, oftentimes intentionally be promoted to DAs, to judgeships, with no consequence. So this is not new. It's a little bit on the other side of the coin about what we're talking about, but it's, I've been surprised at how few stories we've heard in the media about the lawsuits that were filed. So it was evident from any news report that many of these lawsuits were frivolous, yet you heard virtually nothing about the lawyers being held accountable.
Yeah, the only thing we heard is that this was even a Trump appointee that made, that ruled against the filing. Is your take on this, Professor, that it's politically motivated, that it's all about the politics of it, or what? Why wouldn't the bad actors be sanctioned? Instead, you're asserting that they're being promoted.
Well, I don't think I have the answer to that question. If I did, I'd probably be a very rich woman. But I will say that I think a lot of it has to do with the culture. So whether it's the culture of the criminal justice system, whether it's the culture of lawyers protecting other lawyers, a lot of it is about culture. And it is the culture is changing, but as Aaron said, it's pretty damn slow.
Yeah.
He didn't say damn. Those were my words.
A little color on what's today? Thursday afternoon. Let's get back to, and we certainly, if people have comments about the events of the last couple of days, and we'll continue to weave it into our conversation. But the reason why we were gathering today was to talk about how MLK's legacy influences the legal profession, and just a fundamental question, Aaron. What role should the legal profession play in advancing King's legacy of racial equality? I mean, how does that play out in the legal profession in your mind?
Yeah, Paul, I think the duty of the lawyer generally is sacrosanct, right? It goes beyond your duty to the client. That's your primary duty to the client. But I think your duty as a lawyer is to the institution, right? It's to our citizenry. It's to future generations of citizens. So, we owe it to ourselves, I think, as lawyers, and to those who fought and bled and died for our institutions to exist, to truly embody that lawyer's oath, right? To truly try to embody those tenets. So I think we have to get back to the basics, right, as a profession. And I think that'll help get us to where we need to go. I look at the oath all the time because that's our outline, right? I mean, I'm talking to a lot of professors here all about outlines, but I think our outline is literally the lawyer's oath, and not to belabor those points, but when you say not to reject from any consideration personal to myself the cause of defenseless or oppressed, what are you saying, right? You're literally saying that you have an obligation to those people, right, that you can't overlook. And many times, and King would tell you that those individuals, those defenseless, those oppressed individuals, oftentimes have brown skin, oftentimes have other skin, meaning that these individuals are marginalized, right? This is that population of people that you have a responsibility to as part of your oath. This past year, we know has marked significant events that have renewed our focus, galvanized our conscience. But, we have a responsibility as lawyers to look beyond even those incidents, right? We talk a lot about the law enforcement, right? But there have been little progress in a lot of other areas, access to justice issues, right? Even education, poverty issues, right? We have to look at, as lawyers, I think leaders in our community, how can we affect change in all of these areas? I try to take the fight seriously. I learned a lot while at the law school, and I take this fight very personally. You mentioned I was chair of the Equal Access Initiative. So when I was, working in that space, I wanted to make sure that the doors of the courthouse were open to everyone, and I think that was my role, but that's just my role. That's just what I have to do literally every day I walk in the office, right? And in my practice, like the highlight of my career thus far is, when I was able to represent a class of Michigan Medicaid patients who were denied a cure, essentially, to hepatitis C simply because of financial considerations. The state didn't want to pay for certain individuals who hadn't suffered a significant amount of liver scarring yet. But this was essentially a cure. and they were denying these individuals that cure because of purely financial considerations. And I was able to challenge the state and allow ultimately every patient who was denied the right to get this cure, the ability to receive that cure, right? And, that, don't get me wrong, I have great cases for my clients, and certainly we represent, Fortune 500s, and we do all that. But my focus on that case, for over a year is still the highlight of my career, right? And so, Paul, I think that, to advance King's vision, to advance King's mission, I think we need to look at how we can use our justice system, to get us a little bit closer to the mark. King says our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And as a lawyer in your practice, I think your professional life begins to end at that exact same time, right? So, your role as a lawyer in advancing King's vision is to be a voice on those things that ultimately matter.
Is it too easy of an answer that racism, sexism, homophobia are reasons why the profession is not more diverse?
You know what? I think that's a good way of framing it, because it's the simplistic way of looking at it, right?
Yeah.
People look at it that way. They say, well, they're prejudiced, right? They must be racist, right? That's the reason. But we know that there are people of good faith on the side of advancing the cause who don't realize sometimes that even they suffer from unconscious biases and things of that nature. I think, we have to make sure that we try to advance, I think, diversity within our profession, right? Which is one of the most important things we can do to try to advance the way people perceive our profession, right? The legal profession still remains one of the least diverse professions in the country. We all know the stats. Only 4% of attorneys have identified as Black or African American. That was in 2007. In 2017, it rose to 5%. So we haven't moved the needle at all. 2020 was basically the same, right? Unconscious bias, like I just mentioned, I think permeates the legal profession, because it does with every profession, right? It's startling here, though. It's more disconcerting for us as a profession, because we are supposed to be the gatekeepers, if you will, of justice, right? In my firm, we host trainings to address the issues. But, as with every firm, unconscious biases run really deep. They're entrenched. They run to the heart, the core of many legal organizations, many of which have been around for over 100 years. So, and frankly, this year, our law firm and many law firms in the city, we sought to truthfully try to confront these challenges with respect to race. And we wanted to do more than just issue statements. We wanted to issue statements. We wanted to issue statements, but at the end of the day, we wanted to take action, right? And that was the key for us. And all of the large law firms in Detroit, we signed onto the joint statement to do more jointly and severally. But, it's going to take a long time, Paul. I think there's momentum. I think the wind's at our backs in some respects, but there's a countercurrent, right? And it's always going to be there. And we have to try to remain diligent. And if we do that, we can try to make the progress. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Professor Vestrian, it should put a long comment in the chat, and I think I'd ask her to kind of unmute if she could, if she's willing to. And she's making a point about Professor Vestrian. You're making a point about there's been at the state level kind of a public cry for investigations into ethical behavior of its attorneys. Want to expound on that a little bit, because you're an expert on that topic?
Well, it first of all takes people inside of the profession and the public. Anyone can file a grievance against a judge or a lawyer. It doesn't need to be a member of the profession. But I just don't think we should assume that things aren't happening. They may be happening. We have a grad who was recently disbarred for his legal actions on behalf of the president. We'll leave him unnamed. So people are being held accountable, but I think it's just so important. What I see, and Professor Moore and others who are working in this field may or may not agree, what I see a lot of is reluctance on the part of the bar to turn in their brethren. And that just has to end, and it begins with our teaching our students how important this duty is, this duty of self-policing this profession and being leaders in our image and reputation and what we stand for. It requires us to do this hard work. We must stand up, and when we see something that's wrong, do something. And, the rules require it, where the violation is of the nature that calls into serious question a lawyer's honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness as a lawyer. We are obligated to file such a grievance, in particular when we have direct knowledge of the violation. So I think we need to stay tuned. And those of us with direct knowledge, our students, as they go through their careers, should keep these things in mind. You don't just sit by and shake your head. Do something if you can.
Amen.
Yeah, and speaking of students, we have a number of them in the room today. And Aaron, what was MLK's view on education, just generally, and the importance of it?
His views, Paul, on education actually were profound. I have a statement here from him that I read from time to time on that very point, right?
Okay.
But he knows that, the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. But education, which stops with efficiency, may prove the greatest menace to society. The most dangerous criminal may be the man gifted with reason, but with no morals. He says, remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character. That's the goal of education. The complete education gives one not only power of concentration, but worthy objectives upon which to concentrate. He said that if we are not careful, our colleges could produce a group of closed-minded, unscientific, illogical propagandists consumed with immoral acts. That's Dr. King. So ultimately, look, as a student, as a law student, I think, Paul, your mission has to be clear, right? As a lawyer, if your ultimate goal, for example, is to be rich or to become wealthy, right? That's it for your goal. You are singularly focused on some type of individual pursuit. Then probably for the law students here, you need to reevaluate why you're in this, right? As a lawyer, I think you have a worthy objective upon which to concentrate, if to take King's words, right? That is upholding our Constitution, ensuring rights for everyone, maintaining the integrity that's inherent in our system. So, as a law student, I remember, briefing cases and making outlines and trying to consider what the end goal was, right? But I realized that how you pursue every goal will lead to whatever that next goal is. So when I was in law school, I was trying to be successful as I can for me, the client at the time. When I became a lawyer, I got clients, and I'm going to try to be as successful as I can for them. But for every case you end up taking, whether it's $100 million case or $100 case, you need to work as hard for each, right? So you need to work as hard for that $100 client as you do for the $100 million client, right? That's the goal, I think, of every lawyer. So, I think in education, it's important, like he says, to get the knowledge, to get the intellect, to be able to perform. But you need behind that a moral compass. You need a guiding star. You need something to aspire to that's beyond yourself. And if you can take your education and employ it and channel it into that need, into those areas, then ultimately I think you'll fulfill the goal of education the way King hoped and the way King envisioned.
Okay, I was trying to unmute. Sorry for the delay there. One of our students, Jason Allen, is asserting that racism is inherently built into the system. Jason, I wanted to know if you wanted to comment a little bit further on that.
I would be glad to. Hello, Dean Zielinski, by the way.
Hi.
I'm just curious, and my comment is kind of backed up with this mindset of I don't understand why so many people are so afraid to discuss Dr. King's views on anti-capitalism. You know, like we have Martin Luther King Day and we talk about Dr. King and we revere him as one of our histories, but oftentimes I find that people, especially people in positions of power, do not give enough credit to this idea that he wasn't necessarily just against racism as a whole. He was against a system that would ultimately enslave doomed, you know, the poor to this doomed society and benefit a very small portion of the population. And much of King's argument wasn't about necessarily ending racism. It was about changing the system that allowed racism to flourish. He didn't see the end of racism happening without the destruction or the end, or at least a drastic remedy or change to capitalism in and of itself. You know, and I find it really odd that so often it's very rarely mentioned that that was one of his ultimate goals, you know, that reshaping the system and the overall principles that established our society. And we're seeing it play out. You know, we're seeing exactly what he said would happen play out. You know, the FBI has been warning us for 15 to 20 years that white nationalist groups are taking over our police departments and our police unions across the country. You know, we're seeing the ownership-owned system that Dr. King said was the only logical and ultimate conclusion of the capitalist system that we had been implementing after the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendments.
That's very well said, Jason. If I could just piggyback on that, you know, Dr. King's quote, to your point, is, you know, equality means dignity, and dignity demands a job and a paycheck that lasts through the week, right? That was his primary focus for many years prior to his death in 1968. And you're right, we have seen, I think, very little progress in many of these areas. If you look at poverty data since 1980, right, we barely moved the needle, either in Black men or people of color moving out of poverty or into the middle class. And it's that, and in other areas, schools are resegregating. The percentage of Black students are attending schools that are 90 to 100% minority. It went down for a moment, but it's rising back up. I mean, there are places where we see your point, Jason, exemplified, right? Where the inequalities in our system are not only on display, but they're being promoted and they're being reinforced, right? So, you know, it's going to take a long time, and we talk about being frustratingly slow, but we are making progress. You know, my grandfather, he recently passed. Unfortunately, he was 102 years old, so he saw everything in his life, right, from 1918 all the way to this year. And you know, he's still shocked that I could be a partner, you know, at one of the largest law firms in Detroit, right? And to live the type of life I've been able to live thus far. To him, it's a shock, right? Because from his vantage point, he didn't think that was possible, right? And I think we're making progress, but you're right, Jason. It's going to take a long time to get to a place where our system really changes in a way that inures to the benefit of those who are least fortunate.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother conversation we can have down the road about the wealth gap.
Yeah.
That, you know, some politicians and others are starting to address, and that's frankly where, when NPR, I mentioned earlier, I was listening to NPR, and some of the big wealth managers in our society were coming out denouncing yesterday's results. You kind of think about, well, what can you do about closing the wealth gap that occurs, and a lot of times it falls by race and ethnicity. I think there's a couple things that I want to do before we make some final comments, or people have any final questions. One is that we want to remind people at 1 o'clock if you want more conversation about the events of the last couple of days, Professor Schwartz and Barry will be available, and we've got the link in the chat. Terry, if you want to throw it up there a little bit one more time. So that's coming up, and I want to put Director Freeman on the spot because she has this excellent program coming up in a couple of weeks. I think it is. Is it the 21st or the 27th or something like that? Talk about who's coming in next.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. On January 21st, Lieutenant General Honore, who was in charge of the response for Hurricane Katrina, will be speaking as part of our MLK Equal Access to Justice Day. And I'll have to tell you that yesterday I was as shocked as anyone to see what had happened in the Confederate flag being flown in the Capitol. Had a visceral impact on me, my kids, and I really, I so much was thinking about what Lieutenant General Honore would say about all of this, and looking forward to the discussion. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be more coming out about that. You know, the Confederate flag, and I mentioned to Aaron and Terry in the pre, I was trying to go back into my, look into, see if I could find a historical point. And I think yesterday was the first day that the Confederate flag ever entered the U.S. Capitol. Someone fact check me on that to see if that's true or not. But I think that yesterday was the first day that the Confederate flag ever entered the Capitol. A sad day. Aaron, any final comments that you want to make before we let folks take a little bit of a break and maybe join us at 1 o'clock?
No, again, thank you again, Paul and Terry, but to the entire administration and faculty at Cooley. I am forever indebted to you. I'm glad for the opportunity to continue to serve you on the board. But ultimately, we're here for a long fight, and you guys are, and I'm looking at many of my professors, you are training, that next generation of fighters, right? They're going to be on the right side of these debates. They're going to be on the right side of these arguments, because I think you're training them to do that. And to the law students on the line, I see already you guys are already on top of this. You're advancing your own causes and fighting your own fights even today. So anytime I see one of my fellow Cooley alums out in the world, I'm just so proud of the work that you guys are doing. So keep it up. I'm available to assist you law students in any way I can. But with that, Paul, appreciate it again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron, and you do make us so proud, and you're an example for all of our graduates to emulate. And I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. This has been quite a week already, and hopefully the next couple of weeks, we didn't even talk about the 25th Amendment and everything else, which could be a whole nother discussion. Maybe in the 1 o'clock, we'll talk more about that. So join us there, and look for our next WMU Cooley conversation coming up next month. Until then, let's all take care of one another and stay healthy.